You only need to go through this video if you've chosen to use your own KSN-enabled StreamNative Pulsar cluster, because we're going to be setting up the service accounts, the tenants, namespaces, and all the required permissions, which if you've opted to use the training environment where I've provided you a tenant and your permissions files, your JWT and OAuth2, I will have already done all of this for you. So if you've chosen to use your own, go ahead and follow along. Here I have an existing cluster called train2 that I'm going to be setting up some example permissions for, and these are all the required permissions for the course. And they're also listed after the video, but I'm going to show you where everything gets done in your cluster so you can follow along. I'm going to start up by creating a service account. So I'm going to go to Service Accounts, go to New Service Account. We're going to call this Kafka Student. And for best practices, I'm not going to make this a super admin. So I'm going to say Kafka Student Confirm, and that'll take just a second for it to show up in this list as the student account gets created. Here it shows up. I'm going to go over to the right and I'm going to say Download OAuth2 key. So that file ended up in my Downloads folder. You're going to need that later in the course. You're going to be referencing it inside of your Kafka code. And then I'm also going to go to Generate New Token. When I click on it, I can click this copy button. So once you have that token, I believe it lasts for 7 days. You can only have one active token at a time for an account. You'll go ahead and copy that. Don't create a new token now at this point. Continue to use that existing token, paste that into a text file that you have. We also are coming out with API keys where you can have multiple per account and you can set expiration dates and you can expire them then early. That's a feature that will be coming out shortly to StreamNative. So part of the class uses the public default tenant and namespace, and part of it shows you how to use multi-tenancy. First, let me set the required permissions for the first part of the course where you're using public default. So I'm going to go over to tenants and namespaces in the far left. I'm going to go to public, and I'm going to apply this account that I just created as an admin role. And this is going to be required if you use K-streams later in the course. So over here on admin roles, I'm going to add in the new service account I just created, the Kafka student, and they're now a tenant admin. In addition, I'm going to go into public default. Under policy, I'm going to add role, add in that service account we just created, and give it produce and consume permissions. In addition, going back to tenants and namespaces, we'll go to public and we'll go to schema registry. Under policy, I'll add role. And for Kafka student, I'm going to add the produce permissions. Later in the course, we're also going to be doing some multi-tenancy. So back in tenants and namespaces, I'll create a new tenant. I'm going to call this Kafka student. For allowed clusters, I'll select my cluster that I am using for the training. And I am going to select a service account here. I'm going to use Kafka student as an admin for this particular tenant. And then I'm going to create 3 namespaces in here. I'm going to create one called transactions. I'll create another called schema, and I'll create another called georep. And then I'm going to go into each one and give my Kafka account that we had just created consume and produce permissions. So then I'll do that same for schema. And also for georep. You won't be able to complete the georep activity, but we still use that namespace for the shared topic portion of the class. You've now created the service account, the required tenants and namespaces, and required permissions to move forward with the course.